For more on the New Hampshire primary results, we're joined by our CBSN political contributors, Leslie Sanchez and Lynda Tran. Leslie is a Republican strategist and Lynda is a Democratic strategist. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
You guys have been here for hours with us. So let me ask you, this was a huge win for Donald Trump. What is his next move?
He's got to build that operation and get ready for the political establishment machine he is going to hit in South Carolina. This is where the Bush family has a very strong tie. And George W. Bush is coming out, and he's extremely popular. So I think Ted Cruz is looking to make a recovery. What's going to be interesting is where the Bush phenomenon fits in, and does he have the momentum to keep going?
So, Lynda, the same question. We've got Bernie Sanders by a landslide. But, you know, he's moving into South Carolina where Hillary Clinton is polling very, very well. What challenges does he face?
Well, he's obviously going to have to connect beyond the very kind of homogenous demographic that has played to his benefit in the two early states. So he's definitely going to have to figure out who he's connecting with key minority communities, both in South Carolina and in Nevada.
Yeah.
So, Leslie, back to Donald Trump for just a moment. He didn't do so well with attracting those key last-minute voters in New Hampshire. We all have seen the statistics that a lot of voters in New Hampshire make up their minds sometimes when they're standing in that polling booth or that voting booth. So is that going to have to change for him going forward?
I think New Hampshire is just such a microcosm to itself. It's so unique because they have so many undeclared voters that are Republican, Democrat, that move back and forth, and they kind of play this game, which is very unique. You don't see that anywhere else in the country. Independence is actually a much smaller percent of voters overall compared to like the 40% you have in New Hampshire. What that does mean, though, people that like Donald Trump, he's not really losing support regardless of what he says. They are the diehards. If you look at them on Twitter, if you say anything about Donald Trump, they're disparaging, they come out and they get very active. But they're doing the same thing in the polls. And what's going to be interesting is to see that momentum. There were a lot of concerns in GOP establishment if they did not slow down Donald Trump going into New Hampshire and really kind of like phase it and show they had an alternative. It was going to be extremely difficult getting into South Carolina.
So I want to ask you about that. Obviously, the Republican Party as an organization is thinking about November, but are voters thinking about November? We just have a graphic up from New Hampshire Republican voters, a list of the most important qualities for them, and can win in November is fourth. 12%. More important is shares my values and can bring change. What does that say?
It shows that a lot of people are not prepared to think about the big final contest until probably late summer and early part of the fall. We think about it every day, but really this is a constituency that's sending a message. They're frustrated with Washington, all the things we've continued to hear, but they want to be very strong. They don't like the government spending. They didn't like it under George W. Bush. They think Washington is broken, and they'd rather stand by that. The interesting thing when you talk to Trump supporters is they really do think he's somebody that's brash enough, politically incorrect enough to do something in Washington. Frightening as that may be, we don't know what that is.
We don't know what it is yet, but he doesn't either.
He doesn't.
Listen, let's just stick with the Republicans for a moment. But Lynda, I want you to weigh in on this. You know, Marco Rubio seemed to come apart in the last week or so. Chris Christie was not able to capitalize on his dismantling of Marco Rubio at the last GOP debate. But is he just not ready for the big stage? That's the question I'll ask you. And as a strategist, Lynda, I'll ask you, how can you retool that campaign?
I think he's somebody who's going to recalibrate quickly. A lot of people were saying is he's such a neophyte that he doesn't understand policy, how Washington really works, what's his accomplishment record. A lot of people couldn't point to it. I don't think you're going to have that with Senator Rubio. He's fast on his feet. He didn't show that. I think he was slow through the system, but expect him to recalibrate quickly. Expect him not to make the same mistakes. That's what we were talking about here. And then he comes out and says, I'll never do this again. I really believe that.
Is it possible, Lynda, you're coaching a candidate and he's clearly, to me, when I watched that, I felt to myself, all right, those are talking points that he's been given and he's trying to stay on message, but because you've got a former prosecutor sitting there who knows these kinds of sort of, verbal tics, he can point them out, then he repeated them again the next day on the campaign trail.
Yeah, look, they're always talking points. Let's just lay that on the table. Yeah. Every single one of them, including Donald Trump, is spewing talking points in the sense that they thought about what they were going to say beforehand. His challenge was he said exactly the same language over and over and over again. And I think Marco Rubio is at his best when he kind of lets loose a little bit. We saw when he had the flub with the water bottle, he handled it with humor. He could similarly do something like that here. But no matter what, we know there's another debate coming up. We know he has an opportunity to really shift the way that people perceive him. It's what catapulted him, into the sort of not front runner but leading status several debates ago.
Let's talk about about Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
She barely makes it out of Iowa. She loses now in New Hampshire. There had been some talk, and she'd been questioned about whether or not she was looking to retool her campaign, and she sort of poo-pooed that conversation. But is it time to shift strategy a little bit?
Well, there are two things I think that are happening. One is that in any cycle, you are going to continue to staff up as time goes on. You're building your war chest, you're figuring out what your overall long-term strategy is, and inevitably you will hire more people. It's people in state, and it's also people in headquarters. The interesting thing today is that what people are talking about is it looks like she's going to be hiring Jen O'Malley Dillon. For folks who don't know, Jen was the deputy campaign manager for Barack Obama in 2012. She was the battleground states director. Could possibly not be a more important role in 2008 for Obama as well. And so what that tells you is they're not focused on the message piece, what everybody's saying is going wrong. They're focused on doubling down on their ground game, continuing to build the kind of infrastructure that we know it takes to reach voters today.
So Hillary Clinton is not considered trustworthy by a lot of people in New Hampshire, in the Democratic Party. That's a big challenge for her. But I'm also really intrigued, Lynda, by the fact that young people are flocking to Bernie Sanders. It used to be that we would say, well, you know, they've got young people excited, MTV rocked the vote, but when it comes down to actually voting, they're not really there. Can't base our campaign around these young people. It seems now they are the story. And then the other one, women.
Absolutely.
Women are not coming out in support of her the way that they might have been expected to. What's going on there?
Well, I think New Hampshire has to be somewhat of a wake-up call to the team to think about how it is that they're engaging women in particular, but also more broadly young people, as you mentioned. So there's a lot of talk often about the Obama coalition, and she is winning on the rest of that crew so far. But those young people, they're going to matter. And in past cycles, they didn't vote, but the last two, you've shown millions and millions of people got engaged, some of them for the first time by Barack Obama, but they're continuing to vote. It's becoming a habit. So no question they're going to come into play this cycle, and she's got to figure out a way to really connect with them.
Leslie, I have to ask you about John Kasich. He gets the second place position, which is usually significant.
It's a big deal.
But usually people win it by, say, 25% or, you know, a more significant portion of the vote. So is this a good thing moving forward? Does it even mean anything, the second place position in this campaign?
Absolutely. I think what's great about Governor Kasich, there's three parts that lay to that. I think that debate performance we're talking about, it created an opportunity for him. He's also the one with the highest favorables and the lowest unfavorables going in. A lot of people were not paying attention to him. You didn't have super PACs attacking him constantly, created an opportunity. Third part, he has a campaign strategist, John Weaver, who orchestrated two really big wins in that state. They know how to play in New Hampshire. They positioned him well. He did 100+ town halls, and all of that paid off to really, in retail politics, it pays off in New Hampshire. So that's going to propel him in terms of ka-ching the dollars that he needs going forward.
Real quick, Leslie, Chris Christie coming back here to New Jersey, coming back to the tri-state area, the home state, New Jersey. Did he peak too early? Was he not able to capitalize on that takedown of Marco Rubio? Is he done?
He probably is. There's really not a path forward. This is about donors right now. He's going to be calling his donors. Are they going to stay with him? And if not, they're starting to say, look, I need to move on to another campaign. Who's it going to be? Is it John Kasich? Is it Jeb Bush? Doubtfully Marco Rubio, but that's really, it's about money.
All right. Lynda Tran, Leslie Sanchez, thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.